Good morning, my dear children. This is your Shanghita ma'am, and today we will read a poem. The name of the poem is A Legend of the Northland. It is in your Beehive book, page number 65. So this poem is a ballad. What is a ballad? A ballad is a song narrating a story in short stanzas. Ballads are a part of folk culture or popular culture and are passed on orally from one generation to the next. So, A Legend of the Northland is a ballad. A Legend of Northland is written by the American poetess Phoebe Cary. She was an American poetess and the younger sister of the poetess Alice Cary. In the year 1871, she died. So I have already told you that this poem is a ballad. So the story is of the Northland area, the area which is near the North Pole. This exact place is not specified, but Northland means the area in the northernmost part of the earth, that is near the North Pole. Legend means a historical story, one which is very old and has been passed on from generation to generation. So the poem is called A Legend of Northland. Why is it a legend? A legend is an old traditional story that I have told you, usually with a moral teaching. This story is a narrative for children. The poet in the very onset says that she doesn't believe this tale to be true. So this poem is called a legend because it teaches the purpose and the value of generosity, that means kindness, and charity to all our fellow human beings. So let's start reading the poem. Away, away in the Northland, where the hours of the day are few and the nights are so long in winter that they cannot sleep them through. So the poet introduces the place from where the story is derived, that is Northland. The poetess tells us that the days are very short over there and the nights are very long in winter, and it's very difficult to sleep for so many hours in the dark throughout the night. So let's read the second stanza now. Where they harness the swift reindeer to the sledges when it snows, and the children look like bear cubs in their funny furry clothes. So here harness means tie, T-I-E, tie. Reindeer you can see it in the picture that these are some deer that are found in the cold region. They draw the sledges. Furry means made of fur. So the poet continues to give us a description of the people of Northland. She says that when the snow falls, the people like sledging. So they rein the reindeer to the sledges. They use the reindeer to the sledges. And the little children over there, they wear heavy woolen clothes that make them look like little bear cubs. So they look very sweet, very cute, and they look like little bear cubs. Here look like bear cubs, here simile has been used as and like. Wherever we use as and like to compare two things, to different kind of ideas, there we can say that the poetic device is used simile. So like, it is a simile. Let's come to the next stanza. They tell them a curious story. I don't believe it's true, and yet you may learn a lesson if I tell that tale to you. So the poet is informing us that how the elders tell their children this strange and curious story. Although the poet doesn't believe the story that she had heard as a child, she feels that she should narrate the story nonetheless, as it had a good message for us. That I have already mentioned to you, that the generosity, the kindness, the story will be teaching us how to be kind to one another, to each other. Okay, generosity of spirit, goodness of heart, we will learn through that. So that is why the poet is teaching us or telling us the story through this poem. Let's read the next stanza. Once when the good Saint Peter lived in the world below and walked about it preaching, just as he did, you know. The poet then begins to tell us the story. Once there was a saint whose name was Saint Peter. He used to live on earth. He traveled around the world preaching the words of God to the human beings. Preaching means giving sermons or good thoughts or good ideas to the people. Let's read the next stanza. He came to the door of a cottage in travelling round the earth, where a little woman was making cakes and baking them on the hearth. So here in this stanza, cottage means small house made of wood. Baking means cooking food by dry heat without direct exposure to the flame, typically in an oven. Hearth means fireplace. Okay, being faint means feeling tired and dizzy. So the poet in this stanza says that the condition of the Saint Peter, when he came to the little woman's cottage, he was in a very bad condition. His body was pale and tired, and he was very hungry after walking a long journey for the day. He stopped to ask for a piece of cake from the ones that the old woman was already baking, and she had kept the cakes on the shelf. So Saint Peter asked for a single one from the shelf, from the shelf of the cakes that she had already made. And being faint with fasting, for the day was almost done, and he asked her from her store of cakes to give them a single one. So he asked from her a single piece of cake, as because Saint Peter was fasting, was hungry for a long amount of time, period of time. So as he was fasting, that's why he asked from her a single piece of cake. Next, come to the next page number 66. So she made a very little cake, but as it baking lay, she looked at it and thought it seemed too large to give away. Finally, she made a wafer-thin cake for an extremely small lump of dough. However, even this she couldn't bear to give away for free. So she is not willing to give though a tiny bit of small lump of dough that she had made, a wafer thin cake, very thin cake, very small cake she had made. Even that also she was not willing to give away to Saint Peter. So, for she said, "My cakes that seem too small when I eat of them myself are yet too large to give away." So she put them on the shelf. She is giving the reason that why she is not able to give that cake to Saint Peter. The reason that the cakes seemed small when she made it for her consumption, but seemed all too big to be given away for charity. When she is eating for herself, she can eat it. She can have her food, have her cake as large as she wanted. But when she is giving it for free, giving it for charity to somebody else, it seemed too large for her to give away. As a result, she ended up keeping all the baked cakes on the shelf and leaving Saint Peter hungry and faint. Then good Saint Peter grew angry, for he was hungry and faint, and surely such a woman was enough to provoke a saint. In these lines, the poet describes Saint Peter's reaction to the woman. He gets very angry as he was hungry and feeling very weak after a long day's journey. It is difficult to anger a saint because Saint Peter was a very kind-hearted man, very simple man, but she succeeded in doing so by her inhuman behavior. As she was very inhuman, very cruel to Saint Peter, it made him very angry. So he said, "You are far too selfish to dwell in human form." Dwell means to live. "To have both food and shelter, and fire to keep you warm." So here in this stanza, Saint Peter calls her a selfish woman and was not therefore deserving the comfortable lifestyle such as a house and shelter, house for shelter, and water to keep clean, and food to eat, and fire to keep herself warm, that had been granted to human beings. She doesn't deserve these things because she is not a human being from her heart. She doesn't have a very generous heart. So that is why she shouldn't remain as a human being, as she doesn't have a human heart to help others. So Saint Peter gets very angry and he cursed the little woman and deprived her of all the comforts. He said that she would have to build her own nest just like the birds do and dig holes into the hard woods to get worms or insect to feed herself. Okay, she had to find her food just like a bird. In the dry woods, the food will be very hard for her to get, and this kind of life she would be that is the only life she would be deserving. Then up she went through the chimney, never speaking a word, and out of the top flew a woodpecker, for she was changed to a bird. So soon after, the woman was seen going up from the chimney of her house, speechless, and a woodpecker could be seen flying out of her chimney. That means Saint Peter cursed her and she turned out to be a woodpecker. She transformed herself to be a woodpecker because of the curse of Saint Peter. She made Saint Peter very angry because of her inhuman behavior, and so angry Saint Peter made her turn into a woodpecker. She had a scarlet cap on her head. Scarlet means red, and that was left the same. But all the rest of her clothes were burned black as a coal in the flame. So here in this stanza, the poet is describing that how the woodpecker gets its red cap. The scarlet cap on the woman's head was left untouched, while the rest of her clothes that she was wearing when she was a human being that were burned to ashes. So the bird's head was still there, and still there was a shade of red, as she had been wearing a cap previously, and she flew from the chimney of her house as a woodpecker. So every country schoolboy has seen her in the wood where she lives in the trees till this very day, boring and boring for food. Here boring means searching or looking after or making holes in a tree trunks with its beak for finding food. Okay, that means boring. In these lines, the poet says that every countryside boy has seen this woodpecker in the woods, pecking into the bark of the trees in search of food to eat. So food was not easily available to her anymore as it was previously to her. I have already mentioned simile to you in the second stanza, but here in this stanza as well there is a simile, black as coal. Here you can see as, the word as is mentioned. Okay, how the coal looked, it is black. So here it is being compared, her clothes are being compared to as black as a coal. So here simile has been used. Boring and boring, this is repetition. Okay, repetition is being used over here. So this poem teaches us that true happiness lies in sharing things with the persons who are in need. If we are greedy, we cannot have happiness in our life. On the other hand, our charitable nature makes us think about pains and sorrows suffered by the other people. The charitable people have many friends, and they are always connected with one another with a strong bond of sentiments. But the greedy people have hardly any friends, and they often live alone in this world. So true satisfaction lies in sharing things with others. Peace and satisfaction are the two sides of a coin. If there is satisfaction in our life, peace is bound to come in our life. However, greed spoils both. If we are greedy, we cannot get satisfaction as well as peace in our life. In this poem, the old lady was greedy, and she failed to give cake to the saint. If she had a satisfaction, she would certainly have shown honor and regard to the saint. So in this case of this little lady, it can be said that her greed had spoiled her peace and satisfaction. Actually, saints try to create such societies in which all the people shall be treated with equality, and greed will have no room in them. With the help of these teachings, they desire to bring down heavens on the earth. So, this is the poem of the legend of the Northland. I hope you have enjoyed reading with me today this poem. Thank you, children.